Minorities receive less music instruction than their more typical peers. Like it or not, this is just a fact of our profession. Whether these students are minorities because of their race, their ethnicity, their gender identity, their sexual orientation, whatever it may be, they are being underrepresented in music classes. While there are many contributing factors to this, one common scapegoat is that of standardized testing. Bemoaned by all music educators and educators in general, the effects of standardized testing can be seen pretty easily from a teaching perspective. But what about the participation rates of our students in music classes because of those tests? Ken Elpis studied the effects of No Child Left Behind on the overall participation rates for music classes and found that there wasn't really that much of a difference. After No Child Left Behind was enacted and after we had all these standardized tests, enrollment really didn't change. The problem is that enrollment for students who are already underserved, so typical minorities, the Hispanic students, English language learners, and students by APs, they had their situations exacerbated by the additional tests. Where they would normally be able to take a music class, they were suddenly being required to take more remedial courses, taking them away from music classes. But their opportunities still exist, right? Well, kinda, but not really. Just because the opportunity is there doesn't really mean that it's equal. Laura, Sanders, and Morrison found that there was a pretty large gap in participation rates amongst English language learners and native English speakers in music classes. However, when factors of SES and academic achievement were taken into consideration for comparing those numbers, English language learners were really participating at the same rate as the native English speakers. They pointed out that it was actually a lack of opportunity that was keeping them from participation. So even though the opportunities were typically there, it wasn't really opportunity for those students. If there were more programs than just the typical band and choir setup that a lot of schools have, would those students be able to participate in music learning? We have to pay attention to this and understand that just because an opportunity exists in your school, it doesn't necessarily mean that the students are able to participate. We have to be doing more to include all of our students, regardless of their circumstance. This could mean before school or after school programs intentionally created for those types of students or simply advocating on behalf of those students. To somewhat continue on with the previous problem, as music educators, we have to move past the large ensemble format as the only framework from which we work. Education has evolved rapidly, but music, for the most part, has stayed the same in schools. From the band director's standpoint, there seems to be this belief that having a jazz program satisfies all the requirements of having non-traditional course offerings within a school. This may have been true 50 to 60 years ago, but it doesn't really apply now. Today, those types of non-traditional courses don't bring in new students and still kind of leave out the same students we've been already leaving behind. The most common non-traditional courses being taught in Florida, for example, are AP Music Theory, Guitar, and Class Piano. Those classes aren't going to bring in students that we typically don't already get into our classrooms. In fact, most of those non-traditional courses offered in Florida went hand in hand with the all-encompassing Western art tradition. Very few addressed cultural music or musicking. However, even at this base level of branching out past the tradition of the large ensemble, there were students being brought into these classes who weren't already enrolled in music classes. These students weren't already in band or choir or orchestra. They were taking these classes because they wanted something music related to do during school that wasn't playing in an ensemble. Why not add in a more culturally relevant study of hip hop? Often the messages portrayed within the lyrics of these songs are politically, socially, and culturally charged. These messages, delivered through a different lens, are no less important and no less powerful than the messages delivered in the musics of Schoenberg, Shostakovich, Messiaen, or Penderecki. Moving fully away from the large ensemble tradition is rather unlikely, but at the very least we should be able to do a little bit more than just playing exams inside of our classrooms to judge our students. Yet 82% of secondary music teachers use in-class performances as a playing exam as a bulk of their grade. How can you authentically assess a student's progress off a snippet of listening within a class setting like that? Is it anything greater than a binary yes, no, this student has progressed, this student hasn't progressed? Though large ensembles are performance-based classrooms, what can we do assessment-wise to further this idea of comprehensive musicianship? The portfolio model is one concept that could be extremely beneficial to this sort of a setting. Even if a healthy portion of the portfolio are recorded playing exams, opening up the opportunity to insert student creation, even in a performance-based classroom, does more to create lifelong learners than just a playing exam. The other contents that you would require in a portfolio can be as unique to your situation and context as you would like. Better yet, you can put the contents of that portfolio into the hands of the students themselves, offering only a guiding framework of projects and non-playing opportunities, still involving music, in front of the students. Richard Kennel, who was a former BGSU dean, was a proponent of such a system, and he outlined this concept. That concept was published in Joseph Casey's book, Teaching Techniques and Insights for the Instrumental Educator. As a future teacher, one of my biggest concerns is how I'm actually going to be able to implement any of my idealistic visions. Current teachers see scheduling, instructional time, their budgets, the administrative support or non-support as the most negative factors for their classrooms. It's highly unlikely I'll walk into some position that magically doesn't have any of these problems. Because of that, I think it's important for me to seek out success stories or case studies, some sort of pilot program, something to give some sort of guidance to actually create these new sorts of programs that I would like to be able to do. What's even better are some authors will talk through their own failures and their successes in this kind of setting. Matthew Riskansky is one of them, where he goes through trying to create a rock band in his classroom, but also talks about the failure of one of his classes in doing so, but knowing that failure led him to creating a classroom that can be translated into another teacher's context. As ineffectual as it can be sometimes, social media allows someone like myself, who may be a new teacher in a new situation, to lean on this sort of hive mind community mindset of a band director group, so we can get advice or suggestions or feedback for something that I am trying to implement. And in surveying members of the band director Facebook group, Rickles and Brewer found that not only do members enjoy the social aspect of it, but they also believe that there's even this greater feeling that participation develops them on a professional level. And that sort of communal sharing is something that will be invaluable to a new teacher like myself. My last major concern is about remaining authentic. Perhaps stated differently, I'm worried about being seen by my students as inauthentic, as though I'm pandering to them rather than as someone who wants to empower them as individuals. The idea of culturally responsive pedagogy is relatively new and is promising, at least in this field. But I wonder how many teachers are seriously asking themselves these questions. I worry about the deficit model unwittingly being a part of my teaching, as it is so difficult to notice, especially in the moment while teaching. Subtle inequities that I'm not aware of affect my students in ways that I have no comprehension of because I have not lived their contexts. Is it enough to be aware and attempt to respond to these problems by crafting a curriculum which puts the student's identity at the front? There is no getting around the fact that I am a part of the most privileged class of people in this country. Even in making this video, I had to remind myself that at one point I had 0 women represented in any of the little clips of videos that I had been showing. Even when I am actively trying to speak to inclusivity, it's easy to overlook an entire class of people. One of the researchers at the front of hip-hop pedagogy, Adam Cruz, has used his position of relative social power to lift up traditionally forgotten students. Research notwithstanding, the curriculum at the University of Illinois where Cruz teaches offers a number of non-traditional training courses for music education majors, so future educators can feel they have at least a slightly more authentic training background. Should my focus then be on learning as much as I possibly can, or should I focus more on crafting curriculum that is culturally responsive? I think, at least for now, the former will continue to guide me, though the latter, as has been shown by a few authors, is a viable and an important step to creating a music education curriculum that is directed at the individual.
Running out of space on the damn bandwagon. Remember when they used to say I look too mannish? Black girl magic, y'all can't stand it, y'all can't ban it. Made out like a bandit, they've been trying hard just to make us all vanish. I suggest they put a flag on a whole nother planet. Jane Bond, never Jane Doe, and I Jane Go, never Sambo. Black and white, yeah, that's always been my camo. It's looking like y'all gon' need some more ammo. I cut 'em off, I cut 'em off, I cut 'em off like Van Gogh. Now, damn right for the angle, I got away with